This is the eLearning Podcast, episode number 4.
But those bits are gold, and if you can wrap learning in a good social experience, you're going to have a better educational outcome.
Welcome to the eLearning Podcast from lmspulse.com. My name is Stephen Laddick, and I'm the director at LMS Pulse. Today, my guest for our 4th episode is Dean Saunders. Dean is an Australian EdTech pioneer with global exposure across some of the world's largest organizations. Dean leads the team at eCreators to create bespoke learning environments and content truly tailored towards organizational success. eCreators are the minds behind Learnbook LMS and the newly created Learnbook LXP, which is charged with transforming the way people learn at work. You can learn more about Dean and eCreators at eCreators.com. Now, Dean was also one of our top speakers at the eLearning Success Summit, and this conversation proves to be just as cool and fun as the talk over at the summit there. In today's episode, we talk about what's changed in Australia related to the COVID crisis, what Dean calls the great disruptor of our time, and what it's taken to get business started again. We talk about the different roles people have taken in response to the crisis and whether organizations were truly caught off guard or just unprepared in terms of using online systems for education and training. We also talk about why the LMS has become a mission-critical system for organizations and not just sort of something that you use when you're kind of in your training environment or you're ready to learn something new. We spent some time talking about innovations that are happening because of the global shakeup. And we also talk about the opportunity around addressing what Dean calls the loneliness epidemic and how eCreators is both not only creating tech to address this epidemic, but also implementing their own, walking the talk within their organization to make sure people stay connected and feel social in this virtual environment that we find ourselves in. We also talk about why it's critical to wrap education in a social environment and how to unlock the information that's already in your organization and use that to your advantage. Finally, Dean really makes the case for strengthening the connection between education and work. And we really kind of go through a number of great examples of why this is just absolutely critical to make education a key piece within your organization. But before we get started, here's a quick word from our sponsors.
The eLearning Podcast is sponsored by the eLearning Success Summit. Learn from more than 40 experts how to teach, work, and learn online without being overwhelmed. Get your free ticket to the summit at elearningsuccesssummit.com and lmspulse.com, your best source for news, information, and resources for e-learning professionals for more than 10 years. Get our free roundup of the week's top news at lmspulse.com.
Hi, Dean. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me back again. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for people who are not familiar, Dean has been a longtime friend, client, advertiser with LMS Pulse, but also most recently, you were also a guest on the eLearning Success Summit with us, where you talked about the evolution of Learnbook and eCreators and whatnot. Dean, where are you sitting today? I know last time you were down at the beach, but this time you don't. Well, maybe you are still at the beach. I don't know.
No, I'm back uptown today. The good old Zoom virtual background. Don't let it fool you. Creepy. I wish it was though. It's got some pretty cool stuff here. I just searched for funky Zoom background, and I think this came up. But the beauty of where we are now is we can be anywhere.
It's true.
This is my idea of a holiday for this year. It's much cheaper.
So that's a great first question, is what has changed to bring you back from the beach? Here we are. Everybody knows we're recording this sort of beginning-ish of June 2020. The COVID crisis is now sort of evolving itself to a place where businesses are opening back up. People are moving from totally online to sort of blended stuff, and people are going back to work. Was that what prompted you to come back and say, hey, look, we got to get back with clients, or what was it?
Yeah, look, talk about the great disruptor, I would say. We spoke about disruption very differently, 3 or 4 months ago than we certainly do now. You'd see organizations disrupting, industries or sectors alike, but we've never seen a disruptor that disrupts every industry, have we really?
Complete shutdown.
And, we look at how different sectors have fared. The food supply, it hasn't run out. It's affected restaurants and those sorts of things, but our supermarkets are all still running. There seems to be some weird thing in Australia about toilet paper. There was a lot of buying there.
I think that's a worldwide phenomenon. I'm not sure what happened there. Bread, milk, and toilet paper. What's going on there? We don't know.
A lot of people with toilet paper still on their hands, so to speak. The petrol supply, petrol went down. It didn't really have a profound effect. The health system, for the most part, I think in most countries, has been able to cope reasonably well in the scheme of things compared to how we anticipated it would. The education system, which is the one I'm in, I think has handled a lot of things really poorly, to be honest. Yeah, things could have been much better.
So now, like, I don't know how you mark, but in the United States, it's A through F. I don't know if you do what level, like, so what would you rate it? Would you give it, is it a C? Like, hey, this was really average, we could have done better, or is this like fail? We just lost this one.
I guess it's like a mix of grades, really. It's the average would probably be a C, I'd say. But in the whole scheme of things, there were some A examples as well of how some universities, for example, handled it versus how some corporations handled it. I was speaking on Ticker TV just the other day about this exact same thing, and there were instances where you had workplaces, for example, that could just pivot and switch. They have had learning management systems embedded in their organizations for many years. They've been successfully using them. They probably had even 2 or 3 in some instances to find, the right one for their organization. So from an ongoing education perspective, it was easy to flick that switch. Yep, here we go. Learning from home, off you go. Employees were quite used to it. But then the scary thing is looking at some of our K-12 schools and then our higher eds. So you were either really, really well set up to deal with it, and you could flick that switch, which was an audience about that big, compared to an audience this big, who just went, "Oh, we didn't see that coming. What do we do? What tools do we know?" It's like when you have a fire warden in your building. The fire warden goes off to get training. They know when a fire happens. They put on their red hat. They grab the staff checklist. They make sure they're last out of the building, and it's done. So when the fire drill comes along, we're ready to go. This was like red alert. This is not a drill. Well, we didn't even have a drill, so we don't know what to do. So everybody just grabbed the tools that they had available to them. It's like, Paul from IT. He knows what systems we've got. Let's go and talk to Paul in IT. All of a sudden, Paul in IT, who just fixes up things every now and then, is suddenly the technology manager and the LMS manager, and he's responsible for getting everybody online. The other, big side of this too was how parents handle it at home. Parents are not teachers. There's a reason for that, or educators, as I like to call them.
Speaking of the choir here, this has been a huge challenge for us.
Yeah, I guess I count myself a little bit lucky I don't have kids. So in this instance, I sort of dodged a silver bullet, if you like. But having friends and sitting around in social situations at the right distance, obviously, and hearing some of these issues, it was chaos out there, and seeing the tired expressions on mothers and fathers' faces. And I think just today, most kids in Victoria, where I'm from, in Australia, the kids are getting dropped off today. And I think most of those mums are slowing down to about 40 kilometers an hour and pushing the kids out.
I was just going to say, I think, there's lots of memes out there about parents doing a little dance. Here in Thailand, they've made the decisions just, the school year's over. And so, nobody will be going back to school until the beginning of the year next. But boy, parents are waiting for that. And it wasn't because they don't want to be teachers, and because they don't want to help their kids. It's just, you realize that there's this, it's another full-time job, right? Yeah. So that's another huge realization. I want to circle back before we miss it, though. When you look across your client base, maybe because that's really your big, your focused perspective. Was it, we weren't prepared for this, or was it really just that mindset of, look, the future is virtual, right? And the future is going to at least be some kind of blended learning, right? and we have to accept the fact that we want to, and so some of your clients were already sort of walking down that path, or maybe it's super innovators, right? They were already there. And some of your clients said, you know what, you're going to have to bring us into this kicking and screaming because this is how we do it. You know, I want people in the office. Was it more that mindset, or was it really like they just were completely caught unawares? Because it's hard for me to believe that people just, you know, in 2020 didn't see that virtuosity was an option.
Yeah, exactly right. And again, this sort of comes back to so many of those people being sort of caught off guard again as well too. I mean, a lot of registered training organisations that we deal with in Australia, for example. So these are people who give accredited training to businesses or apprentices or organisations in general. They may have had an LMS as a supplemental thing to their classroom training, not really a digital learning strategy.
So it was nice to have kind of, we know that we kind of need to have this, but it wasn't a part of their full strategy.
Yeah, exactly right. So you either had, again, a mix of organisations who were really well set up for it. It is a revenue stream within their organisation. They have people use the system. We had hybrids who do a little bit over here, but most of their stuff face-to-face, and then some that were just face-to-face. Now, some of that's surrounded obviously by regulatory requirement. Some training has to be delivered face-to-face in Australia. So there were some organisations that couldn't pivot that easily. But what we're seeing...
Can you give me an example of that? Like what's a training that has to be delivered face-to-face? I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, well, it might be, say Certificate 4 in financial services or something similar to that. It's a regulatory requirement to prove that it's actually you who's undertaking the training. That's an example. I'm not sure if it's that exact course, but
okay, sure. Okay, I understand. Where it's like we have to physically know this is you who's accrediting, and we're accrediting, and those kinds of things. Okay, sure.
Exactly right. Yeah, and there's a number of reasons for that. The government brought us some changes a couple of years back because that may be being abused out in the sector as well too. So it had to be become the norm. But in saying that, we're seeing organisations jump onto, like, for example, where we have a massive influx of inquiries to our website, new business, existing organisations increasing their capacity as far as bandwidth and as far as storage go. A lot of organisations are going on sort of monthly type plans as well too. So I think there's a bit of a mindset that, hey, we'll just go by the month, we'll ride this thing out, and then off we go. Some are cautious about cash flow, so they need to obviously manage their money, and we all should be. We don't know what phase 2 might mean, for example. I think what we'll see, though, is that the learning management system will also become one of those redundant systems that is business critical now. So we'll see it play a space where if this sort of thing happens again, if a COVID situation pops up again, we can flick a switch and go virtual straight away. As part of our business recovery plan, our business continuity plan, to make sure that we can keep working. Whereas a lot went, oh my God, there's no more students, there's no more revenue. How do I pay my trainers? How do I pay the bills? How do I do all these things to keep all these lives going? They didn't have a plan. Now people, I think, are getting more savvy to the idea that, this may not be the last pandemic we have. Is it COVID, we get a vaccine and it's all over? When will the vaccine come? How do we make sure that we do interoperate? And I think another big thing that we're seeing out of this too, and I won't go too far off track here, but is new innovation. Whenever
this
we
have, what's actually breaking, and we're not going back, right? We're seeing, like, what do you see in the innovative path?
Yeah, whenever we see, now history has proven to us, whenever we see big global issues, if you want to call them that, or pandemics or wars or whichever, something good always comes out of it. Let's think about World War II. During World War II, we invented a whole stack of things, everything from penicillin through to the slinky, things that everybody still uses today. Everybody had a slinky, or at least knew someone who had a slinky, and there's penicillin that we still use as a medicine. So out of this whole time where the world was, dropping bombs and doing all terrible things to each other, we invented these two wonderful things. In this pandemic, we'll see the same thing. New industries obviously will be born. New educational tools will also be born. And I think, we've seen a lot of gaps in the tools that we do have. Like even with Zoom, I mean, we're using Zoom right now, but Zoom, it'd have all these capacity issues or downtime or little niggly bugs that may have been pushed into the backlog for later, but all of a sudden are really important now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It changes the way we think about the tools that we use, how we use the tools, and creates new ways of thinking, which I think, it's a pity it takes a pandemic for people to start sort of thinking in these new ways. But now that we're here, it's a great thing, I think, that's happening, not just to the educational industry, but to, food tech, ag tech, any other word you want to put an end of the tech on at the end of the day. It's a good thing.
So take me to eCreators specifically. Like, how has this affected your business? How are you starting to, or how have you adapted and changed and delivered different for clients right now? And like, what are maybe some of the changes in your path that you've put in place because you're like, what, we were going to go left, but now maybe we're going to go right because we want to do something different?
Yeah, so there's quite a few things that I guess relate to us. We've been creating new technologies inside our organisation to allow us to scale. So we're on a fairly good growth trajectory. So we've developed new systems which can allow us to launch sites really, really quickly. We can install plugins really, really quickly. We can control versions really, really quickly. We had all this stuff ready to go for another purpose. So COVID suddenly come along and we went, oh, that's okay. Well, we can cope with this increased demand. We're sort of set up for it. In saying that, though, and I think I spoke to you at the summit recently about the loneliness epidemic. Now, the loneliness epidemic we were speaking about before COVID came along. So we found ourselves in another good place, and that is, how do you cure that loneliness epidemic? Right. Because I don't know about you, but after about a week or 2 weeks, I was missing my friends. I was missing being social, and I had enough of Zoom. There was this house party app, I think it was, that came out that sort of went, oh, this is really cool. This is the best thing ever. To okay, that's just another version of Zoom.
Right. Yep.
There was all these other tools to help us interconnect, but we sort of figured out that those things that are important to our lives, our soul food, if you like, we couldn't have, like face-to-face interaction, like any sort of regularity. I mean, I know I can speak for our team, for example. A big focus that certainly I've had for the organisation is making sure that that cultural connection isn't broken. It's been really paramount. So we've used a variety of things. We sent out every team member a pair of pajamas, for example, and had pajama day, all in the same pajamas. We sent out pizzas. We sent out jigsaw puzzles. We're doing online yoga classes. So, really mixing it up, making sure people don't overuse these tools as well. I mean, there was probably a vein of thinking beforehand that a webinar was something you had if you couldn't meet face to face. That's all you used them for. If it was a travel issue or a border issue, or I can't get to you now, let's just have a quick Zoom meeting. It was sort of used as a side thing. I don't think it was ever necessarily meant to be an all the time thing. This is how we always have to meet, because you've heard of Zoom fatigue and these sorts of things.
Oh, absolutely.
It's true. But sometimes I don't want to turn my camera on.
Right.
I'm sure I'm not alone when I say I've been a little bit lazy from time to time, and I've sat there in my Ugg boots and my pajama pants with a t-shirt on, and
Don't make me stand up, man. Don't make me stand up. Come on.
That's right, exactly. So without the camera.
From here down, it's just it gets bad.
Exactly. Sometimes I just want to hip chat, or use Google Hangouts text to say something and use a few emojis and keep the conversation going that way. So that loneliness epidemic is probably more prevalent now than it was pre. We're really seeing how the impact of not having that social contact can really, really hit people. So
how much can have in your eyes I want to hear about the pieces you put in place. You said the pajama party and the pizza party, and those are all still physical things, right? So you sent them, and it was like getting gifts from your work, and which is great because it reminds you that you're cared for, and it reminds you that, hey, look, I'm a part of this community, I'm a part of this group, but I'm still not able to go and actually be in the same room with other humans, right? So have you seen that there's still that gap to cross there, or?
Yeah, look, I think some of the material things, if you want to call them that we did, work in a couple of ways. Obviously, it creates a sense of camaraderie, and there's also an emotional bond. Hey, you're wearing the same pajamas as I am. That's cool. That puts a smile on my dial. You know, there's other little things that we have as an organisation. You might be able to see my wrist, it's got a little orange cabinet rope.
Yep.
So, you know, our staff wear those. You know, we give those to people on day one. It's sort of like a little, you know, welcome to our tribe type.
Sure. Yeah. You've been initiated.
Exactly right. And then, you know, other staff are even breaking out and doing separate things. So I know one of our, Trevor Hutt, who heads up our digital technology team, you know, he's just taken it upon himself to have lunch with random people, you know, from time to time. So he'll call someone from the content team and say, hey, you want to have lunch today? They go, well, with a lack of other things to do, absolutely. So it's creating new bonds in the organisation too, by connecting people with each other who probably wouldn't have gone and had lunch together in the physical space, but you know, are quite happy to sit there with their hamburger, you know, shake out their keyboard crumbs and sit there and have that sort of conversation from time to time. Because people are finding, I think, new ways to use the technology, and those new ways to use the new technology those ways to use the existing technology will morph into new tools, and new tools that allow us to connect in ways that we didn't before. And that can only be a positive thing.
I wonder if we can get some more specificity about, you know, I know on the eLearning Success Summit, we had talked about how Learnbook is turning into a learning experience management tool, right? Rather than just being an LMS, which in most people's minds, okay, look, here's my Microsoft Word, here's Excel, I use that for spreadsheets, here's email, I use for that. And I'm going to go to my learning management system because that's where I get my learning material, or that's where I interact with my teacher. What are the other specific pieces that are you putting in place to address this loneliness epidemic and this new normal that we find ourselves in terms of not only being prepared, but also just thinking in terms of the future, right? Thinking in terms of we can do business differently. Yep.
Yeah, look, I have a big belief that obviously there needs to be that social element to work. If you play together, for example, think back to, if I said to you right now, and I may have asked you this question before, but, you know, think of your fondest moment from university. What is it? What pops to mind?
For me, other than graduating,
Graduating is probably one, but you know, you can think about it deeply.
Well, no, I was just saying my fondest moment from university is actually the non-dorm room social experience, right? So in the universities that I went to in the United States, you were required to be in a dorm for the first year or two, and then you could get a house outside campus, right? But then that's where we learned to be adults, and that's where we learned to be, you know, functioning members of society. And you know, those dinner parties, those gatherings, those places where we would hang out and study and whatnot. That's what I always think of. I never think of the classroom personally, but there you go.
That's exactly right. And you know, if you didn't go to university, it might apply to you in high school or junior school or wherever you might have gone. But those bits are gold, you know, and if you can wrap learning in a good social experience, you're going to have a better educational outcome. There's no doubt about it. Otherwise, you might as well go to a military camp and do school there. You know, if you're in a good social environment and you're involved in social activities, you don't have to be an athlete or any of these wonderful things. You need a buddy to help you through school, or you need lots of friends, or you meet your first girlfriend, or whatever it might be, boyfriend, whatever it is. You wrap all those things into one environment, social and education, that creates goodness. Now, there's a third part that comes around this as well too, and that's creating a knowledge network. So there's so many organizations out there. We're probably a little bit guilty of it as well, but we're building the tool to solve the problem. So, haha, there. But what we're sort of saying is, if you can access that internal knowledge network, you've got a much stronger organization. Now, you can go and find information on YouTube and find information on Facebook and all these wonderful, wonderful places. But there's so much there to filter through. You know, you've got to have a really good noise engine, and you've got to process through all this rubbish just to find those good things that you want, the exact piece of information. Now, let's think about that in an organizational standpoint. A lot of organizations, for example, spend thousands, hundreds of thousands on consultants and the like. That information may already exist inside somebody's head, inside your own organization. You just don't have a format or a capacity to ask that particular question. But I might be Steve, the help desk guy, and John, the CEO, needs a question asked. Does anybody know about X? You just don't have a microphone. You don't have a place you can ask that question, or a forum you can ask that question. Sure, it might go onto a forum or a blog in your LMS, but it's never in real time. You can't easily track that information. It's not as easy to forward that information to someone else, to archive it, to store it. It needs to be in that real-time sort of format, and be in that multimodal format as well too. So I keep coming back to our tagline as an organisation, which is love the way you learn. So whether you an introvert and you only want to text and type and be in your corner, but be brave enough to ask the question via text, great. If you're more extroverted and you want to have a video conversation like this, great. Or you want to transmit your ideas, great. Hey, anyone want to know about how to build a pivot table? I'm going to run a little social experiment at 1 o'clock today. Log on, don't log on, all good. But untapping all that internal knowledge inside the organisation is so important, because so much of it exists. And you can only become a stronger, better at what you do type organisation if you bring all that together. Otherwise, you're going to have staff churn, you're going to have demotivated employees. People want you to know what they know. I remember years ago, I worked for an insurance company, and I came into this insurance company and I found myself in front of a really demotivated workforce. These guys were, it was a call center. So they're all sitting over there hunched above, and I ran a few workshops and asked a few questions, and I call them.
So let me ask, were you able to detect that energy, like when you first walked in, or did you kind of have to and this is something I find incredibly interesting. Obviously this is leading the witness, right, in this line of it. But every time when I've gone to work with a client, you can almost smell what the organizational culture and what the energy is as soon as you walk into the building, or that floor where they all work, where it's just like, is this place engaged? Are people excited to be here? Is there energy? Or is this like, oh crap, when, how long until 8 hours has happened and I can punch out,
Yeah, that's exactly what we had here. I mean, a lot of people can relate to it as well. I mean, when you first come into an organization, your interest is out here. So think of them like mental peaks, is what I call them, more or less. So you're looking around, you're excited, you want to meet people, you want people to know who you are, you want to influence or bring your experience into the organization. So over time, that goes like this. And you get this tunnel vision. This is all I am. I can't influence that, so I'm not getting involved. I'm not going to ask questions. I'm just going to come and do my 9 to 5.
Right.
Now, there's people who are aspirational, live outside that box, but we're talking, in this case, this example, this is what had happened. These guys had come into the organization. They come in all excited with the highest of expectations, and then just became more and more demotivated as they got into their roles. So I took them aside into separate groups, and I said to them, what is it you do for a living? I already knew the answer as to what they did for a living. They perhaps had lost track of what they actually do for a living. So these guys are working in claims processing type roles and underwriting, this sort of stuff. And I asked them one question: what is it you do for a living? And they said the obvious things. I process claims, I send emails, I talk to customers, I handle complaints, all those normal things. But let's tie that back to what you actually do for a living. So you're working in an inbound call center in an insurance company. Why do people call you? They call you because they're in the biggest time of need.
Exactly. I was going to say they're hurting, basically.
That's right. Yeah. And your job is to get them unhurting, if you like, and get them, restore their lives back to normalcy. So people that ring you have smashed their car, or they've lost a loved one, or their house is burnt down, or their jewelry's been stolen, their grandmother's jewelry, and you're the first person who can help them out. How much responsibility do you have? Not to mention the other things. I mean, the person who owns this company or owns this house or whichever rings you up, tells you where they live, what valuables they've got,
Oh, yeah.
where they hide their stuff. I mean, they're putting a lot of trust in you on both ends of the spectrum. So mindset's a really important thing, and and sharing in those experiences and that type of knowledge inside an organisation is a really important thing. A lot of people have got experiences to share. We want to unlock that inside organisations. We don't want it just sitting inside. So many times I've seen in organisations too, after people have left, oh, Johnny knew all about that. Oh, how did he do it? Oh, I don't know.
So where do you see the next? So one thing we haven't talked about up to this stage right now is just sort of what people would consider the traditional learning moment, right? Where it's like, hey, employee X or, John, it's time for your compliance training, or, hey, you're going to go learn a new skill. And there's that learning moment, right? Where they're sent to that training. It sounds to me like you're blending work and education are something that are just happening together all the time. Do you see that there's still a place for those moments where it's like, look, it's time for you to upgrade and we're going to move you from line worker to manager, or, there's a new technology, so you've got to go get trained on it? Or is sort of consistent micro learning every day, pulling from this community, that's the future, and that's how we're all just going to kind of be learning every day? Like, I'll leave it there with you. What do you think?
Yeah, look, it works different sector to sector, I think. There needs to be a much closer connection, if you like, between education and work. I think a lot of people get left in a bit of a void. To give you an example, we have an organisation down here in Victoria called Food and Fibre Gippsland. So in Gippsland, it's an area in regional Victoria where we grow most of our food, all our lettuce, all our corn, spinach. But you've never seen so much food in all your life. It's amazing how much stuff we grow.
Sounds delicious. Sounds awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, wherever you are in the world, you have these things. We're not just special for this, but obviously they have issues with a transient workforce. So it's hard for them to find staff. And not only hard for them to find staff, but you need to onboard them really quickly, because everyone's eating all the time. There's always plenty of work to do. So it needs to be growing. You wait for it to grow. You pick it, you eat it, you pack it, you go straight away. So of the corn growers and the asparagus growers and the trucking companies and all the people involved in the logistical chain, which takes from getting to the paddock to the plate, if you like, it takes a lot of people. It takes a big workforce. And for a lot of these types of jobs, they're the sort of jobs that perhaps a lot of people don't want to do too. It's hard to find job-ready labour. So what we're working with and what we've built for these guys is a learner backpack of sorts. And what that allows you to do, let's say you've worked for the asparagus company, for example. Well, the safety principles that you might use at the asparagus company are exactly the same as they are at the corn factory. So that's your hygiene, your safety, where to press the alarm bell, basic first aid, those sorts of things. As you learn those skills, let's say, for example, asparagus is out of season, you immediately become available. So if I'm now the corn person and corn's now in season, I can say, right, which job-ready people do I have available who can pack food? I can see all ones instantly that have those qualifications and go, great, you've got a job. Send them a text or a notification directly from the system and move them around from industry to industry. So you have this collection, this mobile workforce of people with exactly the right skills that you can pluck from at any one moment. Now that might work very different in a supermarket type environment, for example, maybe, maybe not. But certainly in that food industry, it works really, really well. And we're able to keep people constantly in jobs rather than have people say, work for just a season here and then wait another 3 months before they even get an inkling of a job. It's hard to find a job if you're just a CV on a database somewhere.
Sure, absolutely.
But if someone can physically see you, see that you're ready, see that you got the right quals, and grab you really quickly and onboard you really quickly, that's great. You've got a really mobile, active workforce.
Is this something that the workforce buys into as well, where they're aware that they're a part of this marketplace, for lack of a better term, where it's like, look, I'm going to list my my skill sets, and then that's going to then connect me to employment opportunities? Or is this something that's being run by on the employer side, for lack of a better term? And they're just, you kind of get like a random text. You're like, hey, we thought you might like this over here.
Yeah. So Food and Fibre Gippsland is, if you like, a cooperative. So they're where all the growers can go for additional services. And that might be marketing services, things to help them out with the supply chain. In this case, they've decided to create educational services as well too. So from the system, you can easily deploy a little micro site, a little micro LMS, which has got just your courses and just your content on. But you can also request access to another organisation's LMS, just in case there's a skill that you don't have that they need. You can go on, do the online course, and that gives you another badge. So you're now in that pool of capability to be able to be plucked out.
I love it. And it's still, as much as we like to beat down the badge, right? The people are, that seems like old technology. Certification and accreditation is still the hallmark of learning at the end of the day, right? I have to be able to say, look, I have this skill and it's endorsed by someone you can trust. At the end of that's
especially in a world where things like sanitation and safety and compliance and all these things have such heavy bearing on the employer. Absolutely. So that badge carries real weight. It's not like a blue star that you might get on eBay for how much good feedback you've had. It's real. It's intrinsic. It's not just a little shot of dopamine. It's a real thing that you can carry around. Well, it's a real virtual thing you can carry around.
I want to circle back. I know your time is precious here, and I know that you've got to go here pretty soon, unfortunately. But I want to circle back kind of to the beginning where we were, just kind of thinking about this ecosystem you were talking about, the blending now of working and learning. How are you seeing your clients take either technological shifts or make new investments, or even just change their mindset to how they are approaching workplace? What is the workplace? Is it a physical space? Is it a virtual space? Is it something both? And what technology they need in order to have that in place? Is it still sort of just a free-for-all, or are you starting to see some real strategies coming out? And what sort of technology do you see sort of emerging in your mind to meet these needs of this blended education working environment?
Yeah, you know what? Before this, I was always harping on about how the LMS is one of the most underutilized systems there is. People buy an LMS, they put 3 compliance courses on it, run a report and go, done. They don't use.
That was a heck of an investment.
You're right. Tick that box, it's all done. Now though, we're getting customers call our support lines and the like, our document reads on our support repositories where we've got videos and articles and all sort of stuff has gone like this, because people are going, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I could do that. And they're really coming to use more of the system. So they've gone from I use 12% of the features to I use 60% of the features. I'm playing around with plugins. They're ringing up and going, would you mind spending 10 minutes with me to show me how to do this? So that's great. They're finally getting it. Now, as we sort of mentioned, as I mentioned before, we need to find new things to fill some of those gaps as well. So like the video conferencing tools, and a lot of this is learning as well too. It's learning how to use these things effectively. For example, like maintaining eye contact and making sure all your tools and your hardware are right. I mean, a lot of people just went home and I've never used a webinar before, or I've never played with Zoom before. So again,
the number of pictures of webinars or meetings that I've seen where you've got the person with the camera's going right up their nose, or they're half asleep in their chair, or they just haven't thought through what is my presentation on a camera. They just haven't thought it through at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to continue development of those tools that connect the technology with the people. And again, tie it back into jobs. So I think I spoke to you again last time about mentors, for example. So if you're out of work, you've still got knowledge in your head. Let's get that knowledge out of your head. Let's make use of it. So that knowledge that you've got in your head is useful to someone. So if we can get you to do a couple of sessions a week talking to different people anywhere in the world about what it is you do or what expertise you can provide, if we can't just fill that little time you're unemployed, or create that like a job for you, like you will with Upwork or Fiverr or any of these sorts of things, but create that extended knowledge economy, this is as better time as ever to do it. We don't want people hitting our unemployment lines and our poverty lines, and whenever we see these things, we see escalations in domestic violence and all these sorts of things too. So let's deal with that right now, because we have a collection of tools out there that can be bolted together to get us through this stage, if you like. But it's about creating that one tool, that ease of use tool that people can go to. So the Google of search, the Facebook of social, the LinkedIn of business. What is it for the social education network? Like our products, but I'm biased. But tools that we need to work with. Absolutely.
Dean, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I know you're a super busy guy, so taking the time out to do this is really, really special for us. I wish you all the best, and I'm sure that we're going to connect again in the near future.
Always enjoy speaking to you. Thanks, Stephen.
Cheers. Thanks again for tuning into today's episode of the eLearning Podcast. If you like what you've learned today in this episode, I encourage you to either follow us or subscribe to us on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. And please do share this episode with one or two of your colleagues or friends. Also, I just want to remind you that you can level up your online learning game with all of the information that's available at the eLearning Success Summit. You can get your free ticket at elearningsuccesssummit.com. And finally, you can also stay up to date on everything that's important, all the news and the resources for e-learning professionals at lmspulse.com. Get our free newsletter by just going to lmspulse.com today. Thanks again.